What they identified was that his left anterior descending coronary artery in the front of the heart, the entire lower third was moth-eaten and diseased, over too long a segment to have stents, too far down the artery to have a bypass. So he was very depressed about this, so my wife Ann and I had him out to the house with his wife for supper 2 weeks after his heart attack. Joe, you've been eating this typical Western diet. You got the typical Western disease. We've got 10 years of data. How about going plant-based? Okay, yes, I'll give it a shot. They couldn't offer me anything else. He became the absolute personification of commitment to plant-based nutrition. And over the next 30 months, he then had another angiogram. Yeah. So it was really quite striking and exciting to see what actually can happen when you give the body every opportunity it can. The healing capacity is incredible. Now, conventional cardiology with all those procedures and all that expense is high mortality, high morbidity, and sadly it does not cure the disease and the expense is unsustainable. However, when you're treating causality with plant-based nutrition, no mortality with the diet, no morbidity with the diet, and what happens with the passage of time, the benefits just continue to improve. And lastly, nobody has greater fear of another heart attack than somebody who's already had a heart attack. And how empowering it can be for them and their family to know that they themselves can now become the locus of control for this disease, destroying it, whereas in the past it had been trying to destroy them. So in summary, it is really so exciting what happens when you treat the causation of disease, because it is not only prompt, it is powerful, and it is persistent. And for those who in the future are coming down with cardiovascular disease, I hope it is going to be unconscionable not to inform them of the power of this option from which they can thrive. Thank you.
And there was a fascinating study published by the American Diabetes Association in 2009. They looked at a group of people who were all Seventh-day Adventists. And the reason they studied Adventists, I was not terribly familiar with the Adventist religion before I got involved in research, but they offer a wonderful, well, really a gold mine for researchers. And that is, church teachings say you shouldn't smoke, or drink alcohol, or use caffeine, or eat meat. And almost all Adventists are really good at the first three of those. But they're not necessarily so good with the don't eat meat part. And so it sets up a perfect natural experiment of health-conscious non-smokers, non-drinkers who vary in their diets, and that allows you to compare. So this was published in 2009, and they looked at different groups. The orange bar on the left is meat eaters, non-vegetarians. And what we're tracking is body mass index, BMI. Are you familiar with BMI? BMI is your weight, but it's adjusted for your height. And so a healthy BMI is below 25. And above 25, we say overweight. So non-vegetarians were at 28.8, a little bit into the overweight area, which is where average Americans are. And then there were semi-vegetarians, meaning they ate meat but no more than once a week. They were a little thinner. And then there were pesco-vegetarians. What's that? Okay, so they didn't eat any meat except for fish. And they were thinner. And lacto-ovo-vegetarians, lacto meaning milk, ovo meaning eggs. Okay, lacto-ovo, so they didn't eat any meat at all, or fish, but they ate milk and eggs. And they were skinnier. And then look at that blue bar. Those are people following a vegan diet. Now, a vegan is not a person from the planet Vegas. But what that means is they're not having any animal products at all. And they are actually the only group that's smack in the middle of the healthy diet range, the healthy weight range. So the reason the American Diabetes Association published this, though, was because of these figures, which are the diabetes prevalence. Same gradient, but just much more dramatic. So the meat eaters have a lot, the vegan people have almost none, and the other groups just slot in between.
Well, we know from the largest forward-looking study on diet and cancer ever performed by humanity, the incidence of all cancers combined lower among vegetarians than meat eaters, especially some of the fastest growing tumors like lymphomas and leukemias. This is measuring cancer cell clearance. And this is what we saw before, the effect of blood taken from those eating a plant-based diet, in this case for 14 years. Along with mild exercise, just like walking every day, right? So, plant-based diets, walking, that's the kind of cancer cell clearance you get. Compared to the cancer-stopping power of your average sedentary meat eater, which is basically non-existent. Okay. But what about this middle group? Now, this middle group, instead of 14 years on a plant-based diet, they had 14 years of the standard American diet, but had daily, strenuous, hour-long exercise. And exercise worked, no question, right? But literally 5,000 hours in the gym, no match for a plant-based diet. The answer to the Pritikin puzzle is IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1. Is the cancer-promoting growth hormone involved in every stage of cancer growth, spread, metastases, cancer invasion. But you put people on a plant-based diet, and their IGF-1 levels, plant-based diet, go down. And if they continue to be on a plant-based diet, this is just after a few weeks, if you're on a plant-based diet long-term, levels drop even further. And their IGF-1 binding proteins go up. That's one of the ways our body suppresses cancer growth, protect itself from cancer. The bottom line is that male or female, right, just eating a vegetarian diet did not seem to cut it, right? Didn't do your body many favors. Right? Looks like to get that significant drop in that cancer-promoting growth hormone levels, one really has to move towards eliminating animal products altogether.
Even more good news is that it's not limited just to coronary artery disease and diabetes. Most degenerative conditions can be stopped or reversed with the right type of diet. In fact, the only time when it really isn't appropriate is if there's some type of trauma or emergency. So I've always told people, if I'm in a car accident, my body's splattered all over the sidewalk, please do not bring me a baked potato. I'm really convinced that that's not going to help me much, right? But that's really not where we're spending most of our money on in healthcare. That's not what most patients are going through. Most patients are being treated for this list of stuff. And these are the conditions that respond really well to diet. I want to come back to this genetic issue that we talked about in the beginning, because it really is hard for people to believe if they have 13 people with type 2 diabetes in their family that they're not just destined to get it. But the reality is that you're not just destined to get it. And we have some great proof that genes don't tell the whole story. Some of that is in the form of migration studies. We know that when people move from an area of the world where they experience pretty good health to an area of the world like the United States where we have pretty bad health, guess what happens to them when they get here? Their health declines just like ours. In fact, it takes about a generation to duplicate our obesity and disease rates. Studies of identical twins, and again, there are a lot of citations for this type of stuff in your curriculum book, but studies of identical twins show that health outcomes are based more on choices, dietary habits and lifestyle choices than genes. And doctors who treat patients with what we call diet-centered medicine all report the same thing, which is that compliance on the diet, like what I showed you with Dr. Esselstyn's research, much more significant in determining the outcomes than genetic history. And we watch people routinely eat their way out of disease conditions in spite of the fact that the diseases run in their families and other family members have those conditions. The question is, when you begin to eat a plant-based diet, do you run the risk of deficiencies? And you don't. And the reason is you can go to a nutrient database, pick any one. The United States Department of Agriculture has one, NutriData has it, and you can start running 2,000 calories worth of plant-based food through the nutrient database, look at the numbers, and find a deficiency condition on anything that we measure, and you're simply not going to see it.
And how much protein do you need? Well, think about the greatest time of growth in your life. That's when you were a baby. And what's the ideal food for a baby? Human breast milk. And how much protein does human breast milk have in it? 5% of the calories are from protein. So we have sweet potatoes that are 6% protein. We have regular potatoes that are 11% protein. We have oatmeal that's 16% protein, and beans that are 28% protein. And by the way, those proteins are complete in all the amino acids and properly balanced, so you don't have to worry about that either. It's just a habit of people on the Western diet to consume all that milk, thanks to the dairy industry. People from Africa, they don't drink milk. As a matter of fact, people from Africa who try and drink milk, I'm talking about the black Africans, what happens is they have lactose intolerance. They get sick when they consume dairy products. So how about the people from Asia? Same thing. They get sick. They don't consume dairy products, and they have normal adult skeletons, don't they? In fact, some of them are quite large, quite tall, and they never have any difficulty getting all the calcium they need from starches, vegetables, and fruits. You have to leave out those unhealthy vegan foods like the soy meats and the soy cheeses and the margarines that are made of 100% fat. And you have to stop taking your salad and dumping a whole bunch of olive oil all over the top. You have to get rid of the soy cheesecake and the fake ice cream. These things have to go. You know, they're high in fat and high in sugar, and they're causing you to be unhealthy, personally unhealthy. That's the source of the repeated injuries. You stop that, the body does what it's always been doing, which is healing. It's just now it can outpace the injury. And you heal, and the diseases go away.
The solution to all problems is not a colorful pill, particularly when it comes to chronic diseases. Now, what the pharmaceutical industry does is what any good business would do. They invent products that have some benefits and hopefully not more harms than benefits, and they promote them, advertise them, and they get people to buy their products. Now, you know, sometimes the products are not shown to be so efficacious, and sometimes the harms are horrendous. And you know that the drug companies have been known and caught at hiding these adverse effects and exaggerating the benefits of their drugs. And most of the sickness that we have in our society that requires pills like cholesterol and blood pressure and diabetes and pain pills and laxatives and antacids, etc., almost all of these are due to a diet, and fortunately, most of these are corrected easily by changing your diet.
When my work has demonstrated is that food cravings and food addictions and the desire to overeat are increased by a diet that's low in micronutrients. Let me just review that briefly. What I'm saying here is that the formula for long life and a healthy life expectancy is to choose to eat a diet style that has comprehensive micronutrient adequacy. That's adequate in micronutrients, while not over-consuming calories. We want to meet our micronutrient needs in a lower caloric load. But the point is that when we're eating mushrooms, eggplants, tomatoes, peppers, onions, cauliflowers, beans, artichokes, apples, kiwis, cucumbers, lettuce, tomatoes, and green vegetables, you can't fill up your stomach with many calories. You get full before you put in many calories. It's very hard to become overweight when you're eating a cancer-protective, heart disease-protective diet, if you're eating natural foods. And diets of all description don't work. They don't work because telling people to cut back on calories that are already micronutrient deficient is like telling you to stop breathing air. Start breathing at 14 breaths a minute, breathe at 10 breaths a minute. You'll be gasping for air. It's that people don't feel well eating less food. And until they focus on the micronutrients quality of what they're eating, they're not going to be comfortable reducing the quantity of what they're eating. If you eat healthy enough, you get put back in touch with the instinctual drives to when to eat and when not to eat. And those natural instinctual drives put you in touch with the right amount of calories to eat to maintain your perfect ideal weight for the rest of your life. And your person should never put fat on the body. There's no way in which true hunger can put fat on you. It doesn't exist for that purpose. To have gained weight and become fat, you would have to have eaten outside of the demands of true hunger due to recreational or addictive eating. And what brought back their ability to finally get back to their ideal weight and keep it off was the knowledge about food addiction. And not just telling them to eat less, but removing the biochemical drives that were forcing them to overeat. That there's both an emotional and physical nature to food addictions, and those emotional and physical drives are intertwined like fibers of a cloth, and without addressing all the causes of overweightness and addictions, you're not going to have ideal success in enabling people to achieve their ideal weight and their ideal health.
According to the WHO, if we use 1 hectare of land to produce beef, we can feed 1 person a year. And for sheep, we can feed 2 people in a year. But the same area of land used to produce plant food such as rice and potatoes can feed 20 times as many people. That is, any given acreage can feed about 20 times as many people eating a plant-based diet as it could people eating the standard industrialized country diet. We waste a lot of energy by cycling plant food through animals rather than eating it directly ourselves, because most of the calories in the food we give animals are no longer available to us. Most of the food is converted into energy used for movement, or energy to form and excrete manure, or energy to grow body parts not eaten by us. But what we seldom hear is that a staggering 760 million tons of feed per year are diverted from the mouths of starving people into billions of farmed animals. That's nearly half the world's grain supply. Not only is much of the grain from developed countries fed to animals, but even countries whose own people are starving are using their land to grow grain for export to feed animals in more affluent countries. According to the United Nations Environment Programme, taking the energy value of the meat produced into consideration, the loss of calories by feeding the cereals to animals instead of using the cereals directly as human food represents the annual calorie need for more than 3.5 billion people. Producing any kind of food takes energy, but some foods take considerably more than others. In general, producing 1 calorie of animal protein requires burning 10 times more fossil fuel than producing 1 calorie of plant protein, and as a result releases 10 times as much carbon dioxide. The following study shows clearly how organic meat still harms the environment. Foodwatch of Germany published a comprehensive study of the effects of agriculture on the climate, the first study of its kind that differentiates between conventional and organic farming. The scientists who conducted the study, with Germany's Institute for Ecological Economy Research, accounted for both the CO2 emissions resulting from the production of feed and fertilizers, as well as the land requirements and productivity of various methods. Then they translated this into mileage driven by a BMW. Foodwatch of Germany compared conventionally and organically raised meat, dairy and plant foods, omnivorous, vegetarian and vegan diets. They found that eating a diet including meat for 1 year was equivalent to driving 4,758 kilometers. Eating a diet including only organic meat did not reduce the emissions by much. It was still equivalent to driving 4,377 kilometers. Eating a diet without meat but including dairy was equivalent to driving 2,427 kilometers. But eating a purely plant-based diet with no animal products was equivalent to driving 629 kilometers, and when the plants were organic, this reduced further to only 281 kilometers.
Instead of 18%, as the original 2006 United Nations report stated, a number of researchers, independent of each other, have now found that livestock can produce, it's possible, that they can produce as much as 51% of all human-induced greenhouse gas emissions found in our atmosphere, mostly created by the respiratory carbon dioxide and the land use changes that they didn't account for in that first report, and the methane production by these billions of animals themselves. Regardless of where this exact number resides, somewhere between 30 and 51%, it's not 18, and it's also not acceptable. This is how much land is being used to raise livestock. 45% of the entire land mass on Earth. Now, how accurate is this ridiculous 45% figure? Well, it was documented by the International Livestock Research Institute. So most likely, this 45% figure was underestimated. The average household in our country uses 50,000 gallons of water in 1 year, according to the EPA. About the same outdoors. That's quite a bit of water. And it's what we're focused on in times of drought, isn't it? Like how to reduce this. The average person in our country, though, consumes 206 pounds of meat in 1 year, divided between 46 pounds of pig and 58 pounds of cow and 102 pounds of chicken and turkey, in addition to the 248 eggs and 616 pounds of dairy products, which equates to 405,000 gallons, conservatively, of water per person per year, just to support that animal product diet. So, now, a more realistic view that the EPA should use is that every household of 3 people in the US, well, they use over 1 million gallons of water each year, not 50,000. 1.2 million gallons, and 96% of that outrageous water use is from their choice to eat animals. This is what a few thousand to a million-year-old rainforest now looks like, because the world's food priorities are with eating livestock, not with being stewards of other living things, as we should be. This is the sad result. Soon grass, pasture, and cattle will follow this in, usually erosion, desertification, and localized climate change as well. If you choose to eat livestock here in the US or anywhere else, you're going to be supporting this destruction by fueling the global demand for meat. Brazil announced just a few months ago that deforestation in their country hit a 24-year low last year. But what does that really mean? Because they still cut down 2,000 square miles of virgin rainforest during that one-year period of time, just in Brazil. And tropical deforestation rates are increasing in Bolivia, Peru, Malaysia, and numerous other countries in the world. 80% of all rainforest loss in the Amazon is still due to raising cattle, with another 10% loss due to growing crops to feed them and other livestock. And remember again, these livestock are grazing. It's not a matter of factory farming.
Imagine you're a guest at a fancy dinner party. You're sitting down at a beautiful table, enjoying the conversation, drinking fine wine, and eating a delicious beef stew. In fact, the stew is so delicious that you ask the host for her recipe. And she says, flattered, well, the secret is in the meat. You use 3 pounds of well-marinated golden retriever. Now stop for a minute and think about your reaction to that. Dog? In America, we don't eat dogs. Dogs aren't for eating. So chances are your experience radically changed after hearing that line. Chances are what was once food to you, you now see as a dead animal. Chances are what was once delicious just moments ago has become disgusting. Nothing about the meat itself actually changed. The texture is the same, the flavor is the same, the smell is the same, but your experience has dramatically altered. So what's going on here? Your reaction is an example of carnism. Carnism is the invisible belief system that conditions us to eat some animals, but not others. Carnism is why we typically don't envision the animal when we sit down, for instance, to a plate of beef, chicken, or pork. It's also why we can't help but envision the animal when, for instance, we're served golden retriever, swan, or guinea pig. Carnism is the reason that we're typically disgusted by the idea of, out of tens of thousands of animal species, eating all but a tiny handful of them. And it's also the reason we don't stop to think about why this is the case. When meat eating isn't necessary for survival, it's a choice, and our choices always stem from our beliefs. But we don't see meat eating as we do vegetarianism, as a choice based on a set of assumptions about ourselves, our world, and animals. Rather, we see it as a given, as the natural thing to do, as just the way things are. We eat animals without thinking about what we're doing and why, because the belief system that underlies this behavior is invisible. And because our choices matter, it's essential that we understand where our choices come from. So when we understand that eating meat is the inevitable end result of a widespread, deeply entrenched, invisible belief system or ideology, this dramatically changes the way that we think about and talk about meat eating. My hope is that by understanding the invisible system of carnism, people will be able to step outside of that system to make their choices more freely. Because without awareness, there is no free choice. Because in our culture, we've all been conditioned to see the world through the lens of carnism. We're all participants in the system, for better or worse. So our choice isn't whether we participate, but how we participate. With awareness, we can choose to be active witnesses rather than passive bystanders. We can choose to be informed consumers and empowered citizens.